us here tonight. Welcome to the Brain and Performance Center. You're not going to hear very much from me tonight because you're here to hear a story of inspiration. Someone who's overcome true adversity to be with us tonight. It's a truly unique and heartwarming story. And I would like to welcome to the floor Mr. Ant Middleton, who will be our host for this evening, and the star of the show, Mr. Jay Scher.
What seat are you going to take, mate?
Oh, man, no.
Let's split away now. Wow. Well, first and foremost, thank you for everyone for being here. Nick, apologies that I've nicked your job. I'll give you a question at the end. To all the esteemed guests, sheikhs, thank you ever so much for being here. And also to the Brain and Performance Center. Thank you ever so much, Mike, Gil, Craig, Will, part of the family here. And if you've been part of this family, you'll know how welcoming and awesome these guys are just to be here. So thank you ever so much, the Brain and Performance Center, for hosting this event. Now, this isn't about me. I'm Ant Middleton, by the way. Whose phone is that? Is that you, Nick?
No, it's not.
You owe me 10 press-ups. Away you go. This isn't about me. It's about Jay, this phenomenal individual to my right. Now, when it comes to positive mindset, power of positivity, this man is the epitome of that. And as you look at Jay, it's very obvious that he's lacking legs, arms, and that comes to the forefront when you look at him. However, what you don't know is what sits up here. And this is what I'm going to do this evening. I'm going to lift the skull cap off of Jay because the mindset that he has is absolutely phenomenal and it's inspirational. And if I can tell you one thing to do is to pin your ears back. And if you gain, which you will do, 1 ounce of positivity through this interview that you can use now, or it might be something that you compute and that you lock in that you might need to use later on in your life, this is the moment for it. So this just isn't just a story. This is a huge inspiration and positivity to be gained from this individual. Jay, first of all, thank you for being here, buddy. How are you feeling?
Feel great.
Yeah?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Sheikh Latif, Sheikh Saeed, Michael, Gil, DP World, Brain Performance Center. It's truly an honor to be here. I'm not used to speaking in a microphone, so I'm going to get used to this, but it's going to take me a minute or two to hear myself coming through. This is the first time that I've sat down to talk in any kind of format like this, be interviewed. Been asked a lot to do this. I haven't said yes, but I did for this tonight. And just appreciate being here. Thank you.
But I really appreciate it because he has been asked by David Goggins to interview him and he said no. So for me, Ant Middleton, a simple individual, to have the privilege of interviewing you, mate. Firstly, thank you ever so much. This is the first time you've travelled for a while, isn't it? You've obviously, due to your situation, was it because before you used to travel all the time? It's the first time in what, 5-6 months? Travel?
Yeah, this is the first trip in years. So since I got sick in 2019, and this is the first big international trip.
And how does it feel? How do you feel when being back out in the big wide world? And is it just like water off a duck's back, or do you feel like you're back in the game?
It's awesome, but this is also just such an incredible city to come to. Being
Right.
an American, and you come from this idea of the American dream of you can do anything and be anyone and do anything. And you come to Dubai, and it's like you feel that presence immediate. Everybody's here to make something happen. It's like the land of positivity.
Did that voice entice you? Come to Dubai, haven't Before you know it, you're here. Let's rewind straight back because there's a couple of key moments in your life that I really want to tap into. One, obviously, being 5 years ago when this bug took hold of you, and one moment you were running Ironmans, you were a peak athlete, and then all of a sudden you wake up on the hospital bed, which we'll go into in detail. But Take me back to your childhood, Jay. You know, because you were an extremely fit individual, you were a very energetic youngster. Where did that come from? Do you think that come from the family? Was it, or you just quite a unique one from your family unit to have that?
Yeah, that's a good question. My dad was he got stricken with MS when he was 30. So I grew up as a child. You know, he was this extremely fit, muscle. You know, he was a college athlete. He used to swim all the time, and you know, little by little, this disease took hold of him over my childhood, and I didn't realize the impact on that in my life until one day when I was driving down the streets in Chicago, and I'm in my power wheelchair and he's in his power wheelchair. We're driving like, wow, this is surreal. But he was just he was such an athlete. Even though he had MS, he would still go come home from work every day, get in the pool, swim laps. That was it. When we heated the house with wood because he liked to go back in the woods and we'd cut wood together. It was, you know, that's what I did with my dad. We'd go, you know, plant trees and cut wood, and so those are my memories of just, it was always physical and physical in a maybe less in a sporting way and more in just a natural experiencing the world kind of way.
So as a youngster, it sounds like that even through the sort of it's all the metal work that's it and everything off, mate. Listen, don't worry about it. It sounds like that through your childhood, you know, through the face of adversity that your father was going through, he showed the grit and determination and you know, to push forward and march on. Do you think that was ingrained in you subconsciously from a young age? Because what you just described there, I see in you right now. Do you think that played a part in your role to being able to deal with what you've had to deal with later on in your life? Or do you think it was just a case of, you know, just rolling with it and that was just normal life to you?
You know, the significance of that didn't hit me until I lost my father in 2020. This happened to me in 2019, and I lost my dad the following year. And there was these moments where I just was like, I wish he was here to just ask him, like, how did he do it? He was a practicing physician. He didn't stop working. He got up every day and worked well into his 60s. And so I've never had the chance to have that conversation with him, but I do think about that a lot. And I do think I look at that at the time as a child growing up with a father like that, you see it not as a blessing, but as a curse, because, you know, you want to have a normal childhood experience, and your friends' fathers are running around and playing baseball and coaching and doing all that stuff, and your dad's not. But now I see that as a blessing because I have that perspective, and I don't live otherwise.
I find that really interesting you said that, because you mentioned that you would like to speak to your dad about how he got through it and how to get through it. And you are the epitome of marching on, of cracking on, from what you've been through to be where you are today. I don't think that you would probably need his advice. You know, you're at a stage in your life where, like you said to me back, where you're absolutely loving life. Do you think that maybe going back, it's ingrained in your DNA? Now, we talk a lot about DNA and about how we have a positive outlook on life, how we have that grit and determination in us. Do you think subconsciously that your father had a huge role in you dealing with what you had to deal with later on in life without even realizing it? Looking back on it.
Yeah, whether it's DNA or it's a blessing or it's the universe, whatever version of this programming that we all have, I feel like I have that in spades, and I don't necessarily know why. It's not that I don't have bad days. I do have bad days. I do have bad moments. But what I say to myself in those moments is what I used to say to myself when I was doing an Ironman race, which is just keep going. Just don't stop. Just put one foot in front of the other. And if you just do that, if you just force yourself to go to hyperbaric, you know, to go to physiotherapy, to go to work, to make a phone call, it doesn't really matter what it is, whatever the activity is, it will yield something on the other side. Even if it's failure, that's okay too. Whatever it happens, it happens. But so I do have to self-talk myself. I do that a lot, actually. There'll be mornings, you know, where I just wake up and I'm just because it hasn't quite set in when I look at myself that I don't have limbs, and I'm just like, this is just so weird. And then I have to just say to myself, okay, let's go. And then
Got my limbs, but I've got some cool hooks.
One moment leads into another moment, into another moment, into another moment.
Yeah, I love that, what you said about, and I always say that to people, and I think it's an important message. I believe there's no such thing as bad days. There's bad moments. Do not let a bad moment ruin your whole day. In order to have a bad day, you're going to have a consecutive of bad moments. And that's what I always say to people. Don't allow that to happen. Deal with that moment. Do not let it affect the rest of your day, because therefore it could affect the rest of your week. It could affect the rest of your month, and so on and so on. So a great valid point there. Now, take me back to your bad day that you had when you were 20 years old, when you were loving life. You were at the peak of fitness. You were doing all your Ironman competitions. You were an athlete. You were at an athlete plus standard of fitness back then, and then something happened.
Yeah, so there is a weird twist to this story. So the theory of why what I had was called Haemophilus influenza A, and it's essentially encapsulated bacteria. If there's medical people here, that would make sense to them. If you remember when COVID was going around, they said the reason why it was hard for your body to process was because it was like a hard shell around the virus, and your body couldn't penetrate it. And so I had a bacteria that had this hard shell, and one of the things that one of the organs in your body, your spleen, which I lost my spleen, what Ant's referring to, when I was 20 in a car accident. And what your spleen does, kind of like the special forces of your immune system. So it will lure in these bugs, and then these special forces beat the bugs up, and you get better and move on. I don't have a spleen. So one of the theories is, in this very weird twist of fate, is that I got this bug, which normally would just make someone have the flu and not feel very well. And I ended up getting sepsis and septic shock and DIC and all the other things that happened to bring us to this point. So when I was 20, I was in this car accident that Gil was a part of my life at that time, and very much that was, I think, really what forged our friendship was that accident. We both lost somebody very close to us in that accident, and I lost my spleen. And at the time, they didn't know that the spleen had such a significant role in the immune system. So when I lost it, they were like, you get the spleen, it's fine, you don't need it, no big deal, you'll go through life. About 10, 15 years later, they realized, oh wow, this is a really important thing to have. But me being, Mr. Tough Guy, when I had my cold and I'm sitting at home and I'm not feeling well, it took a very close friend of mine, a business partner in the pizza business, to bring me to the hospital, and then that's what started my journey there. So yes, that was.
But I think it's really important that, because I spoke to Jay yesterday, and I mentioned the removal of the spleen, and he was just like, it was just a spleen, and you didn't even murmur at that prospect of you just lost the spleen, and it could affect your life, and it will affect your life. You just cracked on the way that you did, right? The tough guy going on. But after you lost your spleen, you just carried on as per normal, didn't you? Nothing really affected you until obviously 5 years ago. Talk me through that mindset that you had of just going, right, I've been in an accident, I've lost my spleen, and I'm just going to carry on as per normal with no thought of anything that could happen to you. Like you said you thought you were sort of invincible going through life from that moment onwards.
Well, that and it, you're making me think about things that I haven't thought about in this way. But I think the thing that allowed me to move forward when I was 20 in that situation is I lost somebody very close to me, and I was very concerned about how everyone else was doing in that situation. And so I've always been that way. Even in my approach to business, I always try to find, people that need help, and I try to be helpful to people in their journey. I try to apply my skills to make something bigger, better, more improved than it was. And frankly, when this happened to me 5 years ago, if I didn't have my support network to help me get through it. I mean, there's very specific moments of help that I remember that have allowed me to sit here and talk to all of you, versus a different path. And so that's been now that you say that, I realize it's a very common thread throughout my life.
Because when we spoke yesterday, I found it fascinating how you sort of separated the two situations, which you did. You know, separated the car crash from what happened 5 years ago when you got the bug, and you know, being sort of breaking it down and looking back on it, and knowing how these situations can affect you due to what I've done as well. I sort of saw the connection there, and sometimes it takes an outsider to actually look in and see the connection there. And the first connection was the power of a positive mindset. Just to be able to crack on, lose the spleen, and just go, right, you know what, I'm just going to be completely normal. I'm not going to think anything of it. Got a great support network. I'm just going to, without having one seed of doubt in your head that something could happen or there could be some repercussions of that. I found that fascinating. But also what I found fascinating as well, Jay, is when we go onto your story right now about what happened 5 years ago when you woke up in that hospital bed. I believe in some way that helped prepare you for your darkest days, because without even realizing it, because you just brushed it off, that's a dark time, losing your spleen. You know, I'd like to think that you can't just brush that off, that deep down there's something subconsciously sitting there that helps you get through. So that's why I sort of put the two together. And then you start thinking about what I spoke about, which was really interesting because it just ignites certain things that you didn't realize were there. And it took you to the moment of obviously you needing a spleen in order to get you through this certain illness that you had. Take me back to that moment, and I know you've touched on it briefly, where you found yourself in the hospital bed, waking up thinking, what the hell am I doing here? When's my next Ironman competition?
Yeah, you know, so when I was in a coma for about a month, and I don't fault the doctors for trying to convince, you know, my wife at the time and my brother and everyone to pull the plug. I mean, that was where things were at. I was brain dead. You know, I was at Northwestern, which is one of the best, you know, emergent medical facilities you could be at in the world. But I have very vivid memories of the entire time. In my mind, I was still there. I have vivid memories. Floating over the room. I could tell people what they were wearing that day. I could tell facial expressions. I mean, I was there, even though they said I wasn't there. And you know, little by little, I started to come back. And when I woke up, I knew I was sick, but I just, you know, going back to what you said about just the DNA or whatever, I never thought I was going to die. It never crossed my mind. I just thought, oh, okay, well, you know, I'm gonna just, you know, I remember when the doctor explained that, you know, this happened in February. They had to get me better enough to do the amputations. So I didn't get the amputations until starting the amputations in late April into May. And that was a slow process because they were doing it a little bit at a time. I just figured I'd go get some prosthetics and, you know, be one of these guys in the movie or something. It never occurred to me that things were going to be difficult in that way. And then there was some really challenging times, and still is. But you know, I think part of it is, you know, we talk about support network. You know, my kids are my support network. You know, anybody in your life that you love and you look forward to, that's your support network. And, you know, it's not just the people that come and tell you that you're great, and they love you and this and that. But so, you know, I think that has had a lot to do with it. Just not putting two and two together, that I was actually close to death and that this was a real thing.
So whilst you were in a coma, just to get this right, you skipped quite a bit there. Okay, so whilst you were in a coma, you were to Gil, who was there, to your loved ones, you were basically just a corpse lying there. Completely unrespondent, no flicker of the eyes, no movement of the hands. And you say I suppose it's a spiritual moment, an out-of-body experience. You say you're floating, you could actually see And here?
Oh yeah. In my mind, I was having conversations with people. Like, and so people always ask me like, well, what should I do if I'm be loud. The people that I remember the most were the people that were very vocal with me and very loud and just big personality people. You know, be that person, because I remember those people very well in that moment.
So are you a spiritual type of guy? Is it sort of ignited a sense of spirituality in you, or have you always been sort of quite spiritual yourself? Because that's a big moment for me. You know, when you told me that, it sort of gave me goosebumps, because I think to myself, wow, you know, you were basically dead, lying on the bed. Hence why you lost your arms and your legs, because the extremities were obviously protecting, you know, the core organs in the body. A bit like frostbite. If you've climbed mountains and you've seen frostbite, everything just protects itself and it goes to the main organs, to the core of the body. And ultimately, that's what was happening to you whilst you're in a coma. Because when you woke up, and I laugh because I found it quite funny, the mindset that you have, Jay. It's when you looked at your arm and it was just a black piece of skin. Take me back to that moment, because again, the mindset to think like that, I would have woken up and gone, what's going on here? But you just sort of, again, the power of a positive mindset is absolutely phenomenal. Well, and you are the epitome of it. Take me back to that moment when you looked at your hand.
I will, but just to answer your question around being a spiritual person, I'm absolutely a very spiritual person. And one of the moment, if everybody has a different story about why I live, but there was so much prayer. And I mean, I had imams, I had priests, I had rabbis, I had people from all over the world praying for me. And I just don't think I'm here without that. And if you ask my brother, the moment that I started to get better, literally the moment that I started to get better, was the moment when the doctors said they had convinced him that there was nothing else to do. My brother's a very determined guy. He's my twin brother, by the way. That's another twist of this, but and he's a very resourceful guy. I mean, he had Harvard Medical's difficult diagnosis team on the phone. He had hospitals all over the world, doctors talking about my case, me, and and when it was, I told the story like this.
About to pull the plug and they're so determined.
It's a little emotional for me, but so they had convinced him that I was done. And he, a friend of ours who's an emergency room doctor, but a very spiritual man. And he came and he was by my side the entire time. And so we had doctors on doctors on doctors in this room. And he said, have you asked your father for help? And he said, what do you mean? Asked my father. My dad? He said, no, your father, the creator. You prayed. He said, no. He said, ask your father for help. And literally 20 minutes later, the machine went like beep. And then the doctors came in and they said, well, it's the end of life. Sometimes these things go beep a few times. And another few minutes went by, another beep. And then that was literally the beginning of my recovery. So, you can't ignore that. And my doctors don't ignore that, which is interesting because doctors are, they play the numbers. I mean, it's math. And I still have, when I walk through the halls at Northwestern or I see them, and some of them become some of my close friends, they say to me, like, I can't even begin to tell you, this doesn't make it, I can't believe you're here. I can't believe you're talking to you. This doesn't make any sense. It's changed how I practice medicine, and so I think that sense of spirituality has affected not just me, but just an entire wave, of people.
So prayer starts to happen, you literally, and call in it how it is, you literally come back from the dead because your body is shutting down. It's just about to, you're floating around the room, your extremities are going. That's great signs that your body's shutting down. And it's and when you started coming to, you started twitching, didn't you? And the doctor said that's normal for end of life. He's literally got seconds now. Say your goodbyes. He's gone. But you didn't. You started twitching, and you came back alive, didn't you?
Yeah.
And they actually thought that that was his final moments in life. And talk about that closing door, shutting door moment. You start twitching, and what was the first memory where you actually come to and you're back in the room, shall we say?
It's interesting because we've all heard these near-death experience stories, and so I will tell you they're all true. There's a very vivid memory I have of that. There was a TV, as most hospital rooms have, and there was a scroll on that TV, and I couldn't read the scroll, but I could tell that it was the story of my life. I just knew that for some reason it was the story of my life, and that was what was going on in front of me. And then I remember waking up and starting to wake up, and I have a trach, I can't talk, I'm just making noises, but looking at my limbs and seeing that they're black, as Ant was describing. If you've ever seen frostbite limbs. And so you start creating these stories in your head of, what could have possibly happened? How could this, have occurred? And so, and I did that. So I had this idea in my head that I was, I had crashed my pickup truck. As all good Americans, you drive a big pickup truck, you got to do that, and I was stuck in the snow somewhere, and I must have gotten frostbite, because that's the only logical thing you could think of. And so that was, that was, which seems silly, right? But that's what I thought of.
Yeah, I find that amazing, because that's your mind now trying to compute why you're there.
Yeah.
Again, but thinking about the logic of automatically you assume that it's frostbite. When did you actually realise the severity of the situation and the loved ones around you? What was, because I suppose when you came to, there was elation that you were ultimately back in a room and alive, but then the realisation of how severe you were. When did you realise that? Or still don't you realise it? You probably don't, Jay. You're so positive.
The moment when I was being wheeled in for my amputations, there was a lot of talk of there's something in medicine called limb salvage, where you try to save the limb. And so they do a lot. So there's a lot of talk of, can we save the limbs? Is there possible limb salvage? And there was one doctor in particular, Dr. Dumanian, who he's a very close friend of mine today. He was very frank with me, and I just said, and again, I'm barely talking because I got this trach and they've got to set it up so I can talk. And he just said, you don't have a choice. If you choose to not amputate your limbs, you're probably just going to slowly die of an infection. I mean, there's really no other option. It's just that your limbs could self-amputate, but that, and so I think that I remember crying in that moment, because I did feel the severity and the weight of it. So there are those moments where I've had that experience of, holy cow, this is real. And then that was one of them, for sure.
And what was and I won't say the feeling like, but what was it like knowing that both of your legs and your arms were going to go? And that's not just one leg, one arm, not double amputee, triple amputee, but all of your limbs are going to go.
It's such a surreal situation. At the time, they didn't know how much they were going to amputate. So at the time, this was before my twin brother donated all this tissue to save my knees. I was going to be a double amputee above the knee, so essentially close to my hips. And from the DIC, which is just basically a condition where all the fluids in your body just kind of mix together, and there's no the walls of the blood cells collapse and everything. So they thought they were going to amputate me at the shoulders as well. So there was all this debate of what they were going to do and they weren't going to do, and so a lot of back and forth. And when particular doctor who actually did all of the work, Dr. Samir Attar, is a wonderful man. He just said, it's going to be a lot more painful, but if I go slow, we have a chance of saving more. Is that what you want to do? And this was right before the surgery. They're about to put me out. And I said, yeah, of course, that's what I want to do. And he was like, okay, that's what we'll do. So then that started a process of not just going in for your amputations. Once I went down almost every day for close to 2 to 3 weeks, where they would just nibble off a little bit and see if they could get perfusion in the bone, in the blood vessels, and see if it would work, and see if blood would start to come back. And, which obviously is very connected to what everybody, is doing here with, hyperbaric, and you're getting, it's blood and oxygen, and where there's blood and oxygen, there's healing. So that was the measure. And so he did that for me. And he saved this elbow. It doesn't work perfect. This one bends more than that one, but I got it, and he's very proud of that. And I'm very grateful to him for doing that for me.
And Jay, it's obvious that you're a problem solver. And they say, just the anticipation of what you were saying there was, making me anxious. But they say that anticipation is worse than participation. When they actually came up and said to you, when you knew where you were going to get amputated, at what level, and so you could then go on to problem solving, as you call it, to prosthetics, to getting some kind of movement back. Was there a sense of relief that, okay, we know exactly what's going to happen now. There's no more, let's cut it off from here. We're going to cut it off from here. We're going to amputate from here, and then you can then crack on and progress thereafter. Was there any sense of relief of that participation rather than going through, I suppose, a test phase of taking bits off little by little?
When you're going through that, there's all this risk that you're involved with, infection, this and that, and it's going to take or not take. So, and I guess the way I would answer that is, like, I'm still going to get this elbow to work properly. I have my knee joints. I'm going to go snowboarding again. So I guess it hasn't stopped. So that, I guess I'm tying relief almost synonymous with satisfaction, and I'm not satisfied.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I even have that sense of relief now, because I'm still working to, if you guys see me in 3 weeks, this top part of my nose, which is from my forehead, that's gone, and I've got a beautiful Hollywood nose after that. But so it's just continuing. Now it's progressed as a part of my life as I've started to get back into working full time and doing all the other stuff that I'm doing. And I still would like to go back to endurance racing, and I'm not.
The dream is still very much alive.
I just want to see how far I can push this thing, see what we could do. These are body power prosthetics, and they're amazing. But this technology was invented in 1903 and last updated in 1942. There's a lot to be done here. So one of the companies that I'm involved with is called Psionic. It's Bionic Ant Company. It's amazing technology, but I want to incorporate that into body power. So essentially turning your body into a joystick to then control the bionic hand, as opposed to having your brain control it with myoelectric signals, which is a lot more complicated and expensive, etc. So that's a different rabbit hole. However, but that sense of relief and satisfaction, I don't possess that, I guess. So
just constantly
so long-winded answer
looking
to
to
that.
progress.
Yeah.
That's an amazing mindset to have. And some people would say that you're the unluckiest person on earth, but actually you're the luckiest person on earth, because you have a twin brother that's absolutely pivotal in this progression of yours, because your twin brother was there for you for everything, right? He gave you skin grafts, and it matched, everything sort of formed, everything took. So talk to me about your twin brother and how he became such an important part of your life, not only your support structure, but an important part of his purpose in helping you get back on your feet.
Yeah, my brother is, he's my younger brother by 10 minutes, but I truly is my older brother. He's incredible. So he's got a very successful development company in Miami. He builds big high rises, hotels, some of the best stuff down there. He's got 30 people in his business that he literally moved to the hospital for a year. He was there wasn't a moment that I remember he wasn't there. He was just there all the time. And he doesn't even blink. When they were like, well, the only way we can save his knees is if we take tissue off of your body, but your legs are gonna get tired. You're not gonna be able to, run very far anymore because we're taking a major blood vessel and nerves and all this stuff outside. He was like, yeah, great, do it. Didn't anything twice. He was on the phone. He had me on the phone. There's Dr. Levin at University of Pennsylvania. Is one of the world's leading transplant doctors. And Scott, and he's trying to convince me with Scott because he wants to donate. He wants to do the first identical twin hand transplant surgery. Because when you get a hand, you've seen hand transplants maybe on 2020. They last 5 to 10 years, but then your body eventually figures out how to reject the organ, and you don't keep it. That's it. Your body you take anti-rejection drugs for a long time, but it's a long, challenging road to get a transplanted limb. But if you're an identical twin, you don't have any of those issues. So I'm not going to take his hand. So you won't see me come back here with his hand. But that's what kind of guy he is. He's like, well, I have two. Why do you don't have any? So take one. So yeah. I mean, that's why I have my knees. That's why they were able to rebuild my nose. These are all, I just am blessed to have an identical twin.
Yeah, I love that story because I understand the power of a support network of loved ones that they're not for financial gain or for for ulterior motives, but just present in your life, just there for you. You can hear their voice, like you said in the hospital. I think that's an amazing moment. They're there. You can hear their voice. They're present. When someone's present, you can take in that energy, whether it's a voice that you're hearing, whether it's energy that you're taking in, or whether it's your twin brother, which again, whether you're the luckiest or the unluckiest man on the planet, which we call you the luckiest, to have him be just super present and just, go with it, just, all for yourself. You got quite emotional when you spoke about it back there, and it's a powerful thing to have, but also, looking from his perspective, and myself coming from a big family. I've got 4 brothers and 1 sister. No twins, so I wouldn't give them any of my hands. Could definitely be rejected. But just for him, I suppose it's a huge purpose in his life, being there for you. He knows he can be there for you. For him just to go, right, let's just do it. That's purposeful for him. It's a powerful thing and a powerful connection to have. And I thought that's a very, very sort of powerful message out there. Just being present in someone's life. And when I mean present, being there for the right reasons, being there, connected, energy, spiritually. Nothing else matters. It's just the power of being present is absolutely huge. And your brother is still working with you, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What? You're not going to take his hand, but what are you going to take next from him?
So when I was complaining to my doctor friend Greg about Greg, after like 3 or 4 hours my legs are really sore and I got to start running again and this and that, and he just looks at me and he's like, Jay, I never thought you were going to walk again. He's like, this is skin graft on your legs. He's like, this was put to close up an infectious wound. It wasn't put there for the prosthetic use. What you're doing is beyond anything I ever thought you would be doing. And I said, okay, I got it. But, I got my brother, and so that's the next step, which is He's going to donate some more tissue to cover some of these sensitive areas, which are just skin graft over bone. So we'll have some nice healthy tissue. And, that's the big thing with amputation. So the current world record holder for most number of marathons run in a row is a woman who is an amputee. She had cancer in her leg, in her tibia, and they amputated her. And she's got a prosthetic just like mine. But the point in telling you that is when it's done in a way that's designed, there is, with prosthetic technology today, a lot that can be done to create longevity. And so that's the idea. So we'll maybe run a few more races or something. We'll see what happens.
I'm sure you will, mate.
Yeah.
You mentioned your nose. Was that the scar? Is that through the car accident, or is that?
No, that's from this. Yeah.
So it took your nose up. Now, of course, the extremity.
Yeah. So it's an extremity. Your nose is an extremity. So anywhere that doesn't have great, blood flow, perfusion, you lose. Tips of my ears, little parts of my face. The tip of my nose fell off. So another great doctor, this guy, Dr. Robert Walton, he invented this surgery and won whatever the highest level of prize you can win in plastic surgery for doing this. But so he rebuilt the inside of my nose, and then he takes your forehead and flips it down. So that's why it still is connected here. But this is just for plumbing purposes. We're just feeding blood flow here. And so, as I said, in 3 weeks, that goes away. I've got a good looking nose, but I'm perfectly happy with my nose. If I had it look like this, I'd be just fine. But again, it's just solving the puzzle and putting these pieces together. If a doctor has a chance to take parts off of one human and put them on another, they're going to do it. That's like fun for them.
Is that how you get through, Jay? Because with what you've faced and what you've been through, do you see everything as just problem solving now? Now that you've got, no joints, no arms and hands, do you see just you progressing in life, problem solving, becoming a more functional version of yourself?
Yeah.
Is that what helps you stay positive? Is that what helps you get through? Because it's an amazing mindset to have, and you keep mentioning problem solving. Are you problem solving on yourself?
I think it's interesting. So for me, positivity it's like profit in your business. It's the result of doing everything else right. Nobody can wake up and say, I want to be positive today. You're not going to wake up and say, I want to make a lot of money in my business today. It's like, what does your business do? Why do you exist? What's your purpose? So I enjoy problem solving, and yes, it gives me a sense of purpose in whatever I do, whether it's in business or in college. I had the opportunity to take apart a motorcycle and put it back together again, or I've always kind of been wired that way. So even with these prosthetics, and people are like, oh, that's so cool, you got your watch, your Apple Watch in there, and in a way, I think that feeds positivity, because when we have purpose in what we do, then we feel good.
Yeah, it breeds positivity.
Yeah. So yeah, I do see the connection.
And do you think that's what's making you? Do you think what helps sustain your positive mindset is just constantly figuring out the next move to become, a more functional or better version of who you are? Because I certainly do that. What keeps me preoccupied is trying to be a better version of who I was yesterday. Going from the 0 to 100 doesn't exist, but gaining those small percentages along the way, those small bits of positivity along the way, planting them in your head to become a better version of who you are, whether that's a better partner, a better friend, a better work colleague, whatever it may be. But it seems like that you've got that amplified because you want to become a better version of who you are, but also, like you said, you mentioned on your prosthetic that the technology is quite old. And you're actually working on new parts. Is that keeping you super active as well? Do you actually believe one day, between us and sitting in this room, and it's probably a bit of an insensitive question, do you hope that one day you're gonna have hands that can do something, or is that too far fetched? Am I being a bit too insensitive with that question?
No, not at all. No, for me, it's less about. I want to do things that can affect others, people. So, like for me, the idea of making a better prosthetic is that I could make an affordable bionic prosthetic that's body powered and that's accessible to people all over the world. And that's very interesting to me. I want to be helpful, like that's a big part of what drives me and where I find my sense of purpose. Even when I was doing the Ironman triathlon at the time, I felt I was doing it because I wanted to show my kids, this is what I was telling myself, I want to show my kids, how to live a good life and to be productive and healthy and, eat well and do all this stuff. And that was a big driver for me. What I didn't realize at the time, and I've since just going in my own sense of self-exploration and just listening to, podcasts and, interviews of children who grew up in successful households where potentially a parent is gone or doing a lot of stuff, is that I was a little misguided in that. And so, yes, it was working on myself. And I had this idea that it was for someone else, but sometimes you have to check that, because what I realized was the only thing that children care about is time. And frankly, that's all any of us would care about. Like, if you think about it, like, that's all we have. It's the only commodity in life we have is time. There's a very finite amount of it. One day you don't have any more of it. And so when I'm very selective now about how I spend my time. So when people say like, oh, are you gonna, keep working on yourself and go run another Ironman race or do this or do that, it's like, if it was part of an equation to, in a very genuine way, help facilitate something for others, like, yes, I would do that. I mean, that's honestly the reason why I'm sitting here talking to all of you. I haven't shared my story with anyone. I've just said no. I just wasn't ready to talk about it. But for, in the process of talking to Gil about this and what we're doing and getting to know Ant and it just felt right. So there's just these moments where I was like, okay, this feels right. So
we appreciate
we're gonna
you
talk
and we are grateful for your story.
And Jay, how active are you now as you are? Because I know that you are a super keen athlete. That DNA is always ingrained in you. The grit, determination from a youngster, and I don't care what you say, that's that DNA inside of you from your old man, from your father, from the experiences that you've been through. How active are you? What's the last thing that you've done sort of athletic wise? Because I know that you would run until your limbs fell off.
Yeah, right. So when I went back to the chocolate company in 2023, so I started there in 2004, left in 2016 to have a different lifestyle and start doing angel investing. And that, I would say that's probably the most, we have a factory floor. I'm out there. I walk until my legs are just sore beyond belief, and so I would say that I know it's not athletics in the pure sports sense, but for me, in the sense of just getting up from my desk and walking the floor and meeting with people and walking the Dubai Mall today and just, being active every single day. And I wasn't sure I could do that. When I went back into this operating role, I didn't know I was going to be able to do it. I didn't know I was going to be able to, I knew I had a motor before, but I didn't know I was still going to be able to, get up at 5 or 6 in the morning and work until 11 o'clock at night and just go and then leave these prosthetics on all day and just, deal with, the repercussions of that. And so, so I know that's not the exact maybe answer you were looking for, but there will be more athletics in the future, but, I think they're probably going to involve my boys and, it's whatever whatever they want me to do, I'll do.
And you mentioned the merger of a couple of companies that you're involved with when it comes to robotics. And so what's your hope for the future, not only for yourself, but as you said, for others? And what I find extremely courageous and humbling is that you're willing to be the test dummy for this, or the guinea pig to test on yourself, in order to hopefully one day, be able to pass on over your progression or what you've created, in order for it to be developed even further when you're not here. What does that look like?
I would like, the world isn't created for people like me, but I'm not the only one who it's not created for, right? You just walk around, and yes, there's accessibility, and yes, there's wheelchair cuts and curbs and things like that, but having the blessing that I've got to experience is, when I went through this, I lost my vision as well. Another brilliant doctor, Dr. Michael Snyder from Cincinnati Eye Institute, was able to restore my vision using procedures that he claims I'm the only one in the world who has certain devices in my eye. So I know what it's like to be without sight. And that's a cool thing, to be able to relate to that. And I know what it's like to be in a wheelchair for multiple years. I know what it's like to have to be in a wheelchair van, it's just, and drive around. And so, one of my goals would be to just try to create technologies and accessibilities that are a lot more seamless, so that people that have a limb difference or some challenge, things are just a little bit easier, to do. Whether it's, I mean, my brain's always going. So it's like, I think about it'd be cool if I designed a chair that had water, and then it was in the shower, and then but it was waterproof wheelchair, so I could drive it in the shower myself. So I don't need to ask, my friend Gil to help me take a shower. I can just go take a shower, and things like that. So I'd like to do, I'd like that to be a chapter in my story.
And before I pass over to the audience to ask some questions, no matter what you're going through in life, Jay, how important is it to never give up on yourself?
I think that's it. You see high level athletes, they do self-talk, right? They're always like, okay, you can do this. You're going to go out there, you can do this. I do that all the time. I had a wonderful therapist. I've been really blessed. This guy, Dennis, unfortunately, he just recently passed. He's a wonderful man. And there was one piece of advice that he gave me when I was in a darker place. And he said, Jay, you're hard on yourself, and that's just who you are. He said, but I want you to just, when you wake up in the morning, every morning, I want you to pretend that you're looking out of the window, and you're looking at a weather vane, and you're looking to see which direction the wind is blowing. And that's it. I just want you to take a minute and observe, how are you feeling? That's it. Don't try to change it, I'm not going to tell you to, meditate and, whatever. Just observe, just, for, a second of where you're at in this moment of time. And I hold on to that advice. And I think when we were talking earlier, I described to you someone that was inspirational to me also, that described, it was a gentleman, he was in his 40s, top of the world, multi-hundred millionaire TV producer, LA, the whole 9 yards, got sepsis, lost his limbs, and he was telling me, and he said, I don't say this to everyone, I'm going to say this to you. The best day of my life was the day that I lost all my limbs. And I just had to let that sink in, because I was like, how could that even possibly be? That doesn't make any sense. But those words play over my head, because and I still think that if that's the mountaintop, and if I'm making an analogy to being a mountain climber, at that moment in time, I was still on the bus driving to the base to get to the hike, to get to the base camp. I wasn't even, I could see the mountain range, but the fact that I could see it and know that it was there was a big driving force. And then the idea of just checking in with yourself and just don't quit. Just don't quit. Just put one foot in front of the other. And if you're trying to climb a mountain and you're staring at the top, you're going to fall because you're going to lose your footing. Sometimes you have to look down. You can't always be looking up. Sometimes you have to look down and just stare at the ground and make sure you got one foot going in front. Because if you miss a step, you slide all the way back down. So sometimes you just got to stare at the ground. And I do that a lot. I just say to myself, hey, okay, let's just go. Let's one foot. Just give me one more step. That's it. So.
One positive footstep at a time. Jay, you're an absolute inspiration. I've met a lot of people and I feel absolutely privileged to have interviewed you, and your mindset is phenomenal, and hopefully you've taken something away from this evening, like I said, that you either relate to now or that's been encapsulated in your mind, that when something happens to you later on in life, when you're dealt a bad hand, that you can use the mindset, dive into Jay's mindset, go, this is how we overcome it, this is how we tackled it, and hopefully it will serve you well in the future. Jay, thank you.
Thanks, man.
Right, we will pass it over to the floor. We got the lady straight up there with her hand. We've got a mic, please. And Jay, we're going to take 10, 15 more minutes of your time.
Okay.
And open up to the floor.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much. I'm really speechless. I would like to say something. Describing Jay as a positive person is really too little. It's not positive. This is something that has to have a different adjective. This is something beyond positive, really. Thank you very much. I think you need to write your story, because people, they need such an inspiration story, really. Thank you very much. To go through this 3 weeks and they take off some piece and they keep a piece for 3 weeks. Every day to go with this is amazing. Thank you very much. I'm very touched. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just amazed with your story, but you are not the first one I hear this story. The point is that I want to show you the picture of one of the athletes who was the Olympic athlete, figure skater.
Oh, wow.
So that's Roman Kostyumov, who's a very famous figure skater, Russian one.
Uh-huh.
And so that he was just an athlete for all his life. And then last year he lost his limbs and he lost his arms as well. And so that, the whole figure skating society in Russia was shocked with that. Everybody was praying, everybody was crying, and it shocked me as well, just because I worked for Olympic Games in Sochi 2014, and I saw all those Olympic athletes in front of me, and he was one of them. He was not competing at that time, but still he was in that community. And then, a year ago, it was he finished his professional career, but he was still going for ice skating, and they made just show, which they showed actually to a lot of people all over around Russia, and probably they went to the other countries as well. And then, just out of blue, we hear that he's about to die, and he's in the hospital, and he has one amputation, second, third. It's just like cutting parts of his body. And then eventually, everybody was happy that he survived, and that's how he looks like now. And he has, as I understood, you have 2 kids, yeah?
Yeah.
He has the same 2 kids, and his wife was his partner, figure skater, and obviously they provided just all support to him, and he got the spirit to survive finally, and said that I'm gonna try to help all people who has the same problems just with me, and I'm gonna be an Iron Man in front of my kids and in front of everybody. So
You got to put it
it's actually, I just look at you and I kind of compare with him, and
Yeah.
because it's exactly the way how he looks like you are, and I'm just so amazed to see you here because I haven't seen, I just saw his pictures. Because I saw him during the Olympics like a normal
Yeah.
human being, but then he turned out like this, like an Iron Man, like you are. I'm just wishing you to stay strong and to have so much spirit, so much strength to survive and to make it work for the others who don't know how to figure out this problem. And I think that you should connect with such people. And plus to all, you're an athlete and he is an athlete, and just to have this common spirit all together and just to go ahead and to start helping the others as well. Thank you so much.
Please.
I think you should connect probably just to help each other.
Yeah,
And,
please.
yeah, that could be probably great content for you.
Good.
Thank you.
Any actual questions?
Yeah, I want Jay, just quickly, tell them the Wisconsin story, the farm story.
Okay.
So say that again, Gil, sorry, so everyone can hear.
He's going to tell you a story, which is one of my favorite stories, about how he overcame what he went through.
Quickly, this is, COVID is in full swing in America, early 2020. My doctors are saying, hey, you're immunocompromised. If you can get out of town, you should leave. They're pulling freezer trucks up to the McCormick Center in Chicago. A very close friend of mine who I rode motorcycles with all over the world is a cranberry farmer. And he's got a very large cranberry farm up in northwest Wisconsin, in the least populated county in Wisconsin. So if you've ever, Wisconsin's like any rural area, there's not a whole lot there. His grandmother had passed about 8 years earlier. They had a handicapped accessible home. He said, come up, stay here. I said, okay. So I went up. And I was at really my lowest point at this time. I had just left the hospital, so it's January. I move into a handicapped accessible apartment, and when you leave the hospital, and all of a sudden, my cheering section was gone. So every day I had 20, 30 people coming by to tell me how great I am, and you're going to do this, and we can't wait, and blah. That was all gone. And I'm in this apartment, and everybody's getting on with their life, as people do. And I'm sitting there, and at that point, I didn't want to live like this. I just said, I didn't have any prosthetics. I'm in bed. I was completely dependent. I couldn't toilet myself. I couldn't do anything. And I just said, you know what? I've had a good run. I rode my motorcycle everywhere. I had 2 beautiful boys. I'm good. I'm not going to do this. And I was just done. And at this time is when he said, come up. And I went up there. And I'm in my power chair, and so that, get there that night. The next day he comes over and he looks at the chair. He's a handy guy. He comes over. He's like, can I borrow that part off your chair? I say, yeah, whatever. Comes back. He had welded up a stand and brought over a bunch of guns and had this set up and had me shooting targets across the lake. Now, I'm fairly blind, so I'm not really hitting much, but it was like this moment of like, oh, like I could still do something. The next day, he puts me on his shoulder, literally. And he's not a big guy, but farmers they're strong guys. Picks me up, carries me, throws me in his pickup truck. We drive out to this field, and there's a big excavator there, big piece of equipment. And he picks me up and says, you want to run it? And I was like, well, I can't run a piece of equipment. I don't know. He's like, nah, we'll figure it out. Puts me up, carries me up, steps up, throws me in the cab, duct tapes my limbs to the 2 joystick controls. He's like, you don't need to foot pedals, you're not moving the tracks. Do me a favor, turns it on. He's like, this is an old piece of equipment. Gas gauge is broken. It may run out of gas. move this pile of dirt from here to there. If you got to go take a leak, just pee on the floor. I'll be back in a couple hours. And he left me. And at that moment, I start moving this piece of equipment, and I'm figuring it out. And I used to work construction, so I knew how to use equipment, but figuring it out. And I start moving this pile of dirt. I'm glad I got to tell the story to Gil yesterday, because I got very emotional telling it. Now it's a little less abrasive today. But in that moment, I realized I wasn't useless. I could still do something. I could move this pile of dirt from here to there. And I can't, again, this support network. I mean, I have a guy named Dave in my life who's willing to put me in an excavator and duct tape my arms to the joysticks. And it was just middle of the field, and it was quiet, and it was just, a moment. And that was a pivotal point where I realized, okay, I'm not useless. I can still do something. And I started to get more of those feelings. Then you start to build those emotions and those feelings, and you start to catalog, and you get more and more and more. But that's the Dave Cranberry Farmer excavator story.
Jay, did you pee in the cabin?
Of course.
Can I just ask you one question? So can you tell us what you do now? What you run a business, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little what you do.
Yeah. So I still have as an angel investor, if anyone else in the room is an angel investor, but the whole thing with angel investing is, you've decided that you want to live a life of pain and suffering, and you don't just want to go buy stocks in the public market. You want to go invest in these small businesses with entrepreneurs and try to make them work. So I still do that. I also work with some larger companies. I sit on a public company board, and I've done that since 2012, and very satisfying work, and chair of the audit committee, and all that aspect of it. Which actually the product's either here or coming here. It's called Lifeway Kefir. So it's a Russian drink, and the family they're the Russian Ukrainian that owns it. But the business that I am running as an operator day to day is the chocolate business, which my ex-wife founded in 25 years ago. And then I left in 2016, and then I just came back to in 2023. And so that, Michael, was very cathartic for me in this journey, because I didn't know if I could still grind and do that and be an operator. Because as an investor, you're making calls, you're showing up to some meetings, you're helping, you're coaching, but you have a lot of control over your life in terms of what you do and when you do it. As an operator, you've got 100 people showing up to work every day, and they're depending on you, and they have questions, and you're driving it. And so the decision to go back and run that business again I was very, very, to say I was nervous would be an understatement. And I had to raise a bunch of money to get it revitalized. And so, I had raised money before, but I've never raised money as a guy who's shaking someone's hand with a hook, and so there was that. And so, but the chocolate company it's a beautiful luxury gift experience. There's some here for everyone tonight to try. It's all very short shelf life. It's very craft, and every piece tells a story, which is any of the businesses I've got involved in have that aspect of it. So that's my day today.
Yes, sir.
Super. Jay, I'm fascinated by mental toughness and the idea of mental toughness and how to develop that in people. Is it better? I've got an inbuilt microphone. Is that better?
It's good either way.
We can hear you now.
We can hear you. Just listening to your story there was absolutely inspiring. 2 questions really. Number 1, how much do you think your sort of inbuilt mental toughness factored in to getting you where you are now, versus sort of how much you learned as you went along in your journey? And then I suppose secondly, and I suppose it factors on to the lady that spoke down there about inspiring people, how do you see yourself you know, 'cause you speak very well. You know, you're an amazing man. And how do you see yourself sort of sharing that and developing that toughness for young people, I suppose, really? Because, you know, you strike me as an incredibly mentally tough individual.
Yeah, thank you, first of all. I look at what I have as a gift, you know, as a blessing. And I don't take ownership of it. I don't, you know, I accept it, and I'm so grateful for it because, you know, there's a lot of people out there in the world that look perfect, but they're struggling in very significant ways. And the thing that I get that they don't get is when people see me, they try to open a door. They try to be helpful. They try to say, can I get you something? But if you look perfect, people look at you and say, well, what's wrong with you? You're perfect. What's your problem? Why don't you feel good? And so I have like, I've realized that through this journey that like, wow, it must be hard, you know? So I think I'm just grateful to have the tools that have allowed me to explore wanting to do hard things. I mean, why did I want to go do 6-day motorcycle race in Baja California, Mexico? You know,
do you think that that's really helped? Because obviously that was pre your obviously accident and obviously your condition.
You know,
that's equipped you to deal with where you are now better.
So I really appreciate your question because it's making me think of what we talked about earlier when I talked about my father. And I think that a lot of why I was doing the extreme things that I was doing that were quite painful was because I had a sense of this could all end tomorrow. When he was 30 years old, he got a phone. He started to get tired, and he was a doctor, so he was able to self-diagnose himself. That hey, I've got MS. All of a sudden, life changes. You know, so whether it's a car accident or a disease or cancer or whatever. So I think I just had a high sense of urgency around. Hey, we're all young once. We've got this great vessel, this great body, and at some point the parts wear out. So we got to use them now. You know, like when I was in university, I decided to study philosophy. And my theory on that was I'm never, ever going to have an opportunity to study philosophy again. There's no point in your life where you're like, I'm just going to start reading some philosophy. Maybe when you get older or something, I don't know. But at that point, that was my logic. And in terms of the second part of your question around, you know, speaking like this, I would say that I've always enjoyed having a one-on-one connection with people and trying to be helpful, because it's selfish for me. I enjoy it. So the idea of talking more broadly to a larger group of people and having some type of positive effect that's maybe slightly less intimate, or at least in my mind, less intimate than what I've experienced, is a new path and journey. So we'll see.
That would be great for humanity.
Thank you. One more question. Let's go.
Yeah, one more question.
You're a big man. Over to you.
Tell me how your mum dealt with your dad and you.
The question was, tell me how your mum dealt with your dad and you.
My mom has one of the greatest senses of denial that you'll ever have. As a child, I mean, she just completely insulated us from anything to do with my dad, and as my dad, not as my dad. So we still took trips. I remember we went to the Galapagos, and, you know, we were fortunate. So there was 3 boys, you know, 3 strapping lads. So my dad wanted to go snorkeling. He couldn't. We just pick him up, carry him down to the boat, put him in the raft, and then drive out, and then throw him in the water, and then pull him back in. And that was just what we knew as kids. But in terms of like the taking care of my dad and doing any of that stuff, completely insulated us from it. And even to the point where I would say I had to deal with reconciling some resentment around that. I wanted to take a father-son trip with my dad. I didn't care if I had to help my dad use the toilet. Didn't matter to me. I wanted to do it, but I never got the chance to because she was so enveloping around him. And I would say with me, I don't know if she's even said like, I'm sorry this happened to you, or like, I mean, there's, Gil's shaking his head. He knows. I mean, he knows my mom. She just keeps going. It's just as if,
She's tough.
yeah, she's an old school, just tough woman, I guess. She's a real rock, and she doesn't just help us kids out, but everyone. Tries to help everyone. She's a rescuer, and I think maybe I get that from her too. I've been on a few rescue missions in my life.
Fantastic.
Sorry, I want to ask, since we are here in the center, do you use the oxygen?
A lot. Yeah, I've done probably in excess of 250 dives, and I attribute a lot of my healing and really to my brain, how my brain is able to still, the neuroplasticity and just the rate of recovery. I would say the one physiological, for those who are maybe more medical in the room, thing, my facial plastic surgeon, Dr. Walton, again, world famous, Johns Hopkins, Yale, University of Chicago, Northwestern. When he was going to do this surgery on my nose, he was very skeptical to do it because he did a procedure called the CT angiogram and he did an MRI. And he looked at my vascular system. And you can't draw blood from my veins. They don't exist. Obviously I have skin, they exist, but they don't exist enough to function in that way. You have to go very deep to get in. So like right now, like I have a port in my chest because I get all these surgeries, so it's just very easy to access. Anyway, so he did all these tests and he said, I don't know, it doesn't look good. I don't want to start putting parts off your brother onto your face and then have them not survive because you don't have enough perfusion to have this work. I said, okay. And so I was about maybe, halfway into, maybe not quite halfway, 25% into my hyperbaric oxygen journey. And he said, we eventually agreed he would start doing the surgeries. He did a few delay flap surgeries and some things to create more perfusion. Long story short, he has said to me, and he did not know anything about hyperbaric medicine before. He knew it existed, but he didn't know anything about, because it's not a very well-researched field. And he just said, I've never seen a vascular system go backwards. He's like, I've operated on kids, I've operated on old people, I've operated everybody in between. He's like, I look at your face now, your blood vessels in your face, it's like you're a 19-year-old. He's like, you've literally gone backwards in terms of your vascular system. And he said he's never seen that in his surgical career. Now, granted, this isn't a double-blind study. This is anecdotal, evidence. But, this is a guy who's well into his 70s, one of the most accomplished, surgeons in the world, who's telling me that he believes that hyperbaric oxygen therapy has contributed significantly to my vascular system's ability to create new blood vessels and repair itself. So, take it for what it's worth.
Jay, thank you ever so much. And before you enjoy the fine chocolates and each other's company, I suppose a closing message would be, do not underestimate the importance of being there for one another, being present for one another, whether it's a voice, whether it's a tap on the shoulder, whether it's a look, whether it's just being there. Do not ever underestimate that, because one day it may change your life and keep you alive and on the right path. Brain and Performance Centre, I, Gil, Craig, Dr. Zemma, Gwil, you're all absolute legends, and I feel honoured to be part of this family. And Jay, I know you've been part of it for a while, but welcome to the family. Thank you guys.